The cost of doing nothing. That's the subject matter today, and I wrote an article about it several years ago. This is Bill Eschenbaugh Land Company, Tampa, Florida, land brokers, uh, selling land mostly for development purposes. And the subject matter was taken seriously by a rancher who didn't listen to me then, but called me 5 or 6 years ago and said, boy, we wish we'd have listened to you back then. They did nothing. They did not do any zoning, did not entitle their property, did not vest it for any rights. And consequently, it took almost 5 years to get through the process in today's environment to get their land zoned. And we ran into a number of issues. So some of the things that happen, for example, if you own a nice tract of land in the path of growth and you do nothing, is that your neighbors may sell, and they sell to someone who gets the property zoned, developed, people move in, and once they move in and they look at your nice property next door, they go, wow, what a beautiful park. That's my park. That's where my kids play. That's where my dogs run. And they have a sense of entitlement about your land, Mr. Landowner, Ms. Landowner. And other things that happen too is that critters migrate. As all this development occurs, wildlife tends to move, and you may end up with the gopher tortoises migrating to you. Protected snakes, indigo snakes, for example, are protected. My example, my rancher had 2 or 3 eagles on their property to begin with, since they were on a big lake. But in the process, those eagles had little eagles, and those little eagles built nests, and suddenly, by the time it was ready for development, it had 5 eagles' nests on it, which are protected, and there's a protected zone around them. So things happen just in a natural state, as well as the neighbors maybe being upset about you. But on other sides of the coin, the schools get filled up. And so now maybe your property won't be approved because there's a school capacity issue. Or the highways get filled up with traffic, and there's a problem because the roads are now over capacity, and they can only solve it if you build a whole bunch of new roads for a whole bunch of money, maybe more than what your property is even worth. So those things happen to you. And then government officials change, and government standards change. All these new people moving in want to close the door behind them. Nothing new should happen after they're here. And so they are the ones that may show up at hearings, planning commissions, county commission hearings, or the county commissioners may say, look, we have so much growth, we need a moratorium, stop all new permits. Well, you're in trouble if you don't have yours already in place, or they may change the rules. This just happened recently in both Hernando and Pasco counties, where they decided that a 40-foot wide lot is no longer acceptable. They must be 45 feet wide. There's a problem. That's 10% more land, or 11% more land, technically, actually. It has to go to build a lot for affordable housing. It makes it that much less affordable, and yours is that much more difficult to sell. There are actually some places that don't like apartments, so we find apartment moratoriums, anti-growth against apartments, and your land would ideally produce a lot of money for apartments, but you can't get it zoned for that. There's even some places that people don't like Chick-fil-A. They love the product, they love maybe the company's philosophy, but the double lane and triple lane, and now I understand they're maybe headed to a quad lane, 4-lane drive-throughs, create tremendous traffic issues for surrounding retail, surrounding streets out there, especially during peak hours. So in some cases, the zonings are being denied because it is a Chick-fil-A. And that's almost unthinkable because they were so desirable at one time to have in real estate. I've heard other government officials say there's too many car washes. In some areas, they thought there were too many self-storage units. They just didn't like the looks of these big 3-4 story high boxes. Although if you think about it, that's a really good use of land that produces a lot of taxes, real estate taxes, produces only a limited amount of traffic. I mean, how often do you go to your self-storage unit? Produces no demand on healthcare, no demand on schools for them. So maybe they're really a good return on investment to the county government, but people start to think there are too many of them out there, and so we've had areas where there are moratoriums of no more future development. So another thing that can happen is a wildlife corridor. Who doesn't like wildlife corridors? Wildlife likes them. Most residents like them. Most people think they're absolutely necessary to connect one big wetland series to another big wetland series of land. But what if a wildlife corridor goes across your property? Does that mean you can no longer even build any roads across that wildlife corridor? What happens to the landowner whose land is in the path of where everyone else thinks there should be a wildlife corridor? There may be no taking, no compensation to the landowner, But if you're not vested and you're simply a ranch out in the middle of nowhere at one time, and today you've got a wildlife corridor across you, you may find that your property is almost virtually undevelopable. So the cost of doing nothing can be extremely high. It may be worthwhile as a landowner, even though you have no intentions of selling, that you at least get your property into the right land use category, maybe even properly zoned for future value. So the cost of doing nothing can be extremely high. It may take away complete value of your land for anything other than cattle or agricultural uses. So if you want to talk about it, give me a call. I'm at 813-287-8787, extension 1. Bill Eschenbaugh, the Dirt Dog. Don't forget, the cost of doing nothing can be really high. Thank you.